Human intuition tells us that saving is virtuous. We teach our kids to put coins in piggy banks, we praise thrift as prudence, and we see spending as something to be restrained. Yet economics hides a strange contradiction right under the surface. When everyone saves at once, the whole economy can collapse. This tension between what's smart for one person and what's disastrous for everyone is known as the paradox of thrift. It forces us to question a basic assumption of our modern world. Our entire system, built on productivity and planning, depends, paradoxically, on millions of us being willing to spend, not just save. This is just an economic formula. It's a mirror reflecting our collective psychology and the fragile nature of human coordination. The idea first popped up during the economic chaos of the early 20th century. After the 1929 stock market crash, production ground to a halt, unemployment skyrocketed, and families clung to every penny they had left. Old-school economists insisted that less spending would lead to lower prices and, eventually, more investment. But that's not what happened. Factories shut down because no one was buying anything. Workers lost their jobs because there was no demand. And as incomes dropped, people tried to save even more. It was a vicious cycle of fear. Observing this, the famous economist John Maynard Keynes identified the flaw in the logic. What's prudent for one household becomes a disaster for all of them combined. He explained that an economy works when spending and investment plans line up. But when fear takes over, the desire to save skyrockets, while businesses become too scared to invest. The economy shrinks, even though every single person believes they're making the rational choice. This wasn't just a theory. It was the lived reality of the Great Depression. Keynes called it a fallacy of composition, assuming what is true for an individual must be true for the whole group. Let's break it down. At a personal level, saving makes perfect sense. If you cut back on expenses and build an emergency fund, you're more secure. But when millions of households do this at the same time, the whole structure of the economy changes. Fewer purchases mean less money for businesses, which leads to layoffs and pay cuts. Suddenly, people's incomes are falling, so even if they wanted to spend, they can't. The bizarre result? The total amount of savings in the economy might not even go up and could even go down, despite everyone trying desperately to save more. That's the paradox. The collective attempt to save more leads to less saving overall. Thrift, the supposed virtue, becomes a vice. The invisible hand of the market, which usually guides us, turns into an invisible spiral of collective loss. History gives us a stark example. Between 1929 and 1933, U.S. GDP fell by nearly 30%. Bank failures wiped out people's life savings. Yet the instinct was to hoard whatever was left. Newspapers preached frugality. Families mended old clothes instead of buying new ones. Factories stood silent, not because of a lack of skills or resources, but because no one had any money to spend. Keynes argued this wasn't a moral failure, but a coordination failure. In an economy built on expectations, confidence is the secret currency. When it evaporates, even super low interest rates can't convince businesses to invest. Governments at the time made it worse by cutting their own spending to balance their budgets. Keynes proposed the exact opposite. During a recession, the government should spend more, not less, to fill the gap. This idea, known as counter-cyclical policy, was born from this logic, directly challenging the old-fashioned view of thrift. Now let's fast forward to the 2008 global financial crisis. As the housing market crashed, households felt that same primal urge to tighten their belts. The personal saving rate in the U.S., which had been around 2 to 3%, shot up to nearly 8% by 2009. But despite the government making it incredibly cheap to borrow money, the recovery was painfully slow. Why? Businesses were hesitant to invest because no one was buying. Governments, terrified of debt, started talking about austerity. Europe, in particular, adopted massive spending cuts right when private spending was collapsing, basically repeating the mistakes of the 1930s. Economists like Paul Krugman brought back the Keynesian warning. When everyone tries to save at once, the result is stagnation for everyone. The paradox showed its modern face, an economy drowning in savings but starved of actual investment. Japan's lost decades of deflation tell the same story. Households hoarded cash, companies piled up reserves, and the government had to step in and spend, racking up huge public debt to keep things from grinding to a complete halt. Beneath these big economic patterns, there's a cultural story. Different societies view thrift in different ways. In some parts of Europe, it was historically a sign of discipline and moral virtue. In East Asia, saving is often about family honor and securing the future for generations. In both cases, it's tied to a sense of responsibility. But in our modern consumer economies, that virtue clashes with the system's needs. Economic growth depends on spending, on innovation, on capital constantly moving. When a society becomes too cautious, its economy risks becoming too stagnant to evolve. This is especially true in aging societies. Older people save for retirement, while younger generations are stuck with flat wages. The national savings rate is high, but there's no one to buy the things the economy produces. What was once prudence becomes paralysis. This whole paradox exposes the limits of individual morality when you apply it to a complex system. It asks a tough question. When should we act against our own best instincts for the greater good? The answer lies in understanding feedback loops. What's rational for you can be irrational for the group if it makes the whole system unstable. And this principle goes way beyond economics. Think about an ecosystem. If every organism overconserved energy, the whole system would stagnate. Or in relationships, being too cautious can create mistrust. The paradox of thrift is really a meditation on how interconnected we all are. So what's the solution? The lesson isn't that saving is bad. It's that everyone trying to save at the exact same time, especially during a crisis, is dangerous. This is why good public policy has to work against the cycle. During recessions, governments should spend more and accept deficits. During good times, they should save and pay down debt. Things like unemployment benefits and progressive taxes are designed to do exactly this. They automatically boost spending when the economy slows down. But political speeches often resist this logic. You'll always hear calls for fiscal responsibility, even when the private sector has stopped spending entirely. The moral appeal of saving is powerful, but economics teaches us that morality, when it's detached from how the system actually works, can do more harm than good. Modern economists have even expanded on this. They talk about a balance sheet recession, which is what happens after a financial bubble bursts. Everyone rushes to pay down their debts and repair their finances, cutting spending right when the economy needs it most. Behavioral economics adds another layer, pointing out that we humans are loss-averse. We fear losing money far more than we enjoy gaining the same amount. This psychological bias makes us even more cautious after a crisis. And in our globalized world, the paradox crosses borders. If one major country decides to save more and import less, other countries lose a customer, and the stagnation spreads. National prudence can turn into a global imbalance. Ultimately, saving is a cultural rhythm shaped by history and fear. After every crisis, society retreats into thrift, but no civilization can thrive by hibernating forever. Economies, just like ecosystems, need circulation. Water has to flow, air has to move, and money has to circulate. When that motion stops, decay sets in. The paradox of thrift endures because it touches on a universal conflict, the one between safety and growth, between fear and faith. Keynes described it with equations, but its power is deeply human. When times are good, saving builds our resilience. But when times are bad, spending is what revives our collective trust. An economy isn't a machine. It's a shared story we all believe in. Confidence, expectations, and empathy are its hidden foundations. The paradox of thrift teaches us that true wisdom isn't found in isolation, but in synchronization, in our ability to move together through uncertainty. In the end, saving isn't a sin, and spending isn't a virtue. The paradox just reminds us that prosperity depends on balance, and that the greatest wealth a society has is not what it keeps, but what it dares to circulate. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the ideas that shape our world.